All right. So let's talk about what does this look like at scale, first of all. And the short answer is you kind of already know what this looks like. um, it's just the degree to which you experience it. But emotional intelligence at scale, we would expect to see effective interpersonal communication, and I think that at once seems to speak for itself. But I want to get a little more granular on this when we talk about effective interpersonal communication. I'm going to get a little abstract here for a second, but communication is really the process through which I put whatever lives inside of my brain into your brain. And that it is impossible for that to be 100% accurate. We don't have telepathy, or I don't have telepathy. And if any of you have telepathy, I think you should teach us because I don't know how to do that. But since it's impossible for me to beam a thought into your head, at least so far in 2018, we have to use different processes and mechanisms to convey that information. And so there's something that's always lost. I'm the only me, you're the only you. We have different worldviews. Our command of, currently the English language may or may not be the same. And so there's all these little barriers that interfere with us effectively and accurately communicating. But with emotional intelligence, we have, and I'll get to this momentarily, but deeper relationships. So we have practices that can help us kind of cut through more quickly to the heart of the matter. And so this is at once what I'm communicating as well as how I'm communicating, with the goal being we get to a mutual understanding faster, and we have the skills to overcome challenges, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. So being an effective communicator is maybe shortening the time, the distance between my mind and yours. So that's one thing that we would see a lot. So if you see, a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding, ultimately, could lead to conflict or at least friction. That might be an area to focus on. Deeper relationships. Of course, any relationship takes time, but we also want to give people the skills to learn how to speed that time up, and also make that relationship go deeper than just the surface. I want to be able to understand how you think, what you value, what your priorities are, and be able to factor all of those things into account when we interact with each other. And that's between you and me, but that's also between teams. So we want to understand the team culture in another team or another department, what's important to them, how they like to operate, because that will absolutely affect the way that we interact. And I can even use that as pre-planning. So if I'm going to, initiate contact with you over a particular issue, I want to be able to think about your world and how you operate in it, so I can find the best way to interact with you. All this stuff leads to better collaboration. I want to also zero in on that word collaboration for a minute, because I don't actually think. One thing I learned quickly as I got into the world of business is how the business world likes to kill really good words. I feel like I can't use that word synergy ever again. And collaboration is another one that I think we need to talk about in a more honest fashion. Collaboration is not sticking people into a group and asking them to produce next to each other. In fact, I think what you would see a lot of the time is back and forth compromising. True collaboration is we're able to build on top of each other's ideas. You have a good idea. I love that. That makes me think of this. I don't think that we'll ever see, any relationship that doesn't have some kind of compromise. But true collaboration is rare, and it comes through that deep relationship and effective interpersonal communication, understanding each other and how to get straight to the point so we can start producing in ways that we're both satisfied with, or as a group. All right. And then we would hopefully see a more positive work environment for a few reasons. People would generally know how to control their emotions, manage their emotions a little bit better, communication flowing more readily, deeper relationships, collaboration is more effective. So all of this would lead to the work experience feeling better. less friction in the environment, less frustration. That doesn't mean all that stuff goes away. Work is not vacation. So, it's not a silver bullet to solve work stress, but it can absolutely reduce it, as well as reducing conflict, or, making conflict easier to manage. So this should all be relatively familiar to a lot of you. Just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page there, so I won't spend too much time on this. I'll throw some quick stats at you, and then I'll actually share as well some data that we've seen what it looks like when emotional intelligence is prioritized and considered as an important value to be dealt with in an organization, at scale. So some quick stats for you. Emotional intelligence outperforms IQ 70% of the time. Don't need to go too deep into the neuroscience right now, but a lot of this has to do with the way that your brain processes information about its environment. And so all of that data travels through the emotional centers of your brain first. So you might be a highly analytical person, very logical, rational, all those things. But those thoughts follow your emotional response. And so people who understand that emotional experience is a primary part of how we interpret the world around us, and then access that part of themselves and others to move people forward, we'll be able to draw out more of the value of those kind of more technical skills, analytical skills that absolutely are important. But there's a human component to all this as well. 90% of top performers are highly emotionally intelligent. I think that's pretty well known stat. And some areas where we would see emotional intelligence being a strong indicator of performance: decision making, right? We could think of being cool under pressure, communication, stress tolerance, teamwork, change tolerance, customer service. I think if any of you have ever been in a customer facing role, especially if, like me, perhaps in college, you waited tables, I would bet that some of the most emotionally intelligent people in your organization are customer service, if you have that function. And then trust, really trust being the faith that my brain has that I can predict your behavior in a way that you will behave in a way that is positive to me and mutually respectful. So those are some of the fun stuff. Again, I imagine at this point in 2018, since we've been doing this stuff collectively as a species for decades now, this type of stuff is probably familiar to you. What are some real world examples? I'll just kind of run through some quick high level fun stories for you. You can find out more of those if you want. There's the source at the bottom of the screen, but the Air Force used emotional intelligence as a criteria for selecting who their recruiters were. And that actually ended up saving them $3 million annually, which, if you look at the big Air Force budget, that might be a drop in the water, but that's not insignificant. Meaning that they were able to, by choosing emotionally intelligent recruiters, those recruiters were able to more quickly assess appropriate candidates for various programs, which can reduce the amount of training and development time and job fitment. Totally different example: partners in a multinational consulting firm who scored higher in emotional intelligence delivered $1.2 million more than other partners. So again, a totally different field, but we see this as a strong indicator of performance. 300 top-level execs from 15 global companies. An analysis of those executives showed that there were 6 emotional competencies that they were analyzing, and those who performed stronger in those or had higher scores in those competencies were higher performers. And then lastly, managers of financial advisors at American Express went through an EI training program, and they studied the cohort that went through that program and the cohort that did not. And the managers who did go through that program, their financial advisors grew their businesses by 18.1% compared to the 16.2% for those who were not trained. So why